Tom's head shot up. Celestine! We need to get them to Celestine! He shouted out at the others, heads turning to face him. Tom, we can't hurt a unicorn, Zaka replied despairingly. I don't care. I asked her, she said maybe. Maybes will do right now. Jarrex, we're moving. Jackalope, on your feet, we ain't done yet. That last part was superfluous, as she had already yanked the girl away from Unkai, and started sprinting towards Jarrex. Zarko and Unkai also snapped to it. Tom guessed the excuse of Celestine, having said so, would do for them. Can you walk? Tom questioned the boy, who had come clambering out. He was clearly struggling to get to his feet, even if he had stopped crying. Come now, grab on, I'll carry you. Tom went, kneeling down in front of the kid who lashed on. He grabbed his helmet, slapping it on, then picked up the basket holding it tight, and made his way to where Jarrex was getting clear of the buildings. Unkai had grabbed the boy who had been clutching the basket. Even if he was breathing, he was clearly not in good shape either, Zarko carrying the twins. It was a mad scramble to get everyone on board and secure. Jackie, rifle, Tom went, pointing to the hole where he had left it. Jackalope quickly half ran, half flew over to grab it, as Jarrex set off a gallop to get airborne. Everyone hang on, Zarko instructed, as she held on to the dead girl. Tom made sure the basket wasn't going anywhere as Jarrex jumped into the air, wings driving down hard. Jackalope made it back in no time as Jarrex was getting up to speed, setting down with the precious rifle. Tom quickly slung it over his shoulder. It was clear she had not fared much better than him, eyes red and wet. She was smiling though, and there was hope in her eyes. Tom really hoped Celestine wasn't going to rob her of that. Zarko, do you know where she is? That I do, she replied. There was a hint of reluctance in her voice. As she looked at the kids currently strewn about Jarrex's back, her face seemed to go from stern to pained as she started relaying instructions. Celestine better not be a bitch today or I'm going to end up a heretic, Tom thought to himself, looking at the kids. There were 6 in total, 4 boys and 2 girls, those being the 2 youngest. The oldest of them being the one who had come crawling out. Tom guessed he was around 11, which would make him a young man by Dragonette standards. He was sitting next to Tom, shifting between looking at his little sister in the basket and at the others around him. Clearly overwhelmed by what was happening, the twins still hadn't let go of each other and looked terrified as all hell. What's your name? Tom asked the young man, trying to divert his attention from the girl Jackalope was clutching tight. Poor Jackie, Tom thought to himself. Based on the story of her home, this was likely all too familiar for her, after all. She knew better than anyone what these kids were going through. Lothal, the answer finally came, meekly as could be. Tom turned back to him, doing his best to smile. I'm Tom. Don't worry, I'm less scary than I look. Tom tried in the softest voice he could manage right now. Who are your friends? The kid sniffed a few times before turning to the others, pointing. That's Hulu and Hannah, he went, pointing at the twins. That's Revel, he continued, pointing to the boy Unkai was tending to. That's Rebecca. His voice started to quiver as he pointed to Jackalope, then looking down into the basket. Gennaro, he finished, holding back more crying. Now, come here, Tom went, holding him tight with his right arm. No one else made it, did they? I don't think so, no. I guess Mother was right then. I'll have to do. Lothal continued, bringing out a golden Huntress crown from under his clothes and clutching it tightly in his hands. Oh, buddy, Tom thought. Thank you, sir? I'm no sir. Well, I'm a man if that is what you mean. And don't worry about it. You've had it rough enough. You don't need to thank anyone. That crazy bastard really managed to get us in today? Sapphire couldn't quite believe that. Perhaps the engineering guild was a lot less busy than she thought, or Tink held more sway than she had guessed. Yep, come on now, better hurry up, Tink Jr. replied. They had barely finished breakfast yet, but Sapphire guessed that would have to wait. What about the prototypes? Dakota questioned, not yet moving from her seat. The rudder was easy enough. Membrane lever did the trick just fine, and he managed to light himself on fire only 2 hours ago, so the lighter is coming along well, I think. He lit himself on fire, and that's a good thing? Sapphire had to ask, thinking back to Tom's warning about not getting a crazy guy. Well, it worked, not that it was too hard. Well, wait, 2 hours ago? He hasn't slept yet, has he? Dakota questioned. Going to a meeting with a sleeping crazy inventor, marvellous, Sapphire thought to herself. No, I tried to get him to go to bed. I woke up when he burned himself in the drawing thing. He made those too? Only the inside bit, didn't have time for the wood. It's a proof of concept after all. The lighter is a little big too. How big? Dakota questioned intently. About, I mean, you could hang it on your belt. Dakota sighed a little. When is this meeting? Oh, it's not until late in the afternoon. We were hoping you would lend us a hand. That sounds fun. We got anything more important to do? Balathon questioned, all the while stuffing his face full of fried eggs. We still have more things to find. That won't matter though if we can't afford them. Dakota put down her utensils. Let's go lend a hand then. Having a local guide did help with quite a bit of navigating, especially since Junior seemed to know just about where everything was, even pointing out a few of the things they needed as they glided over the city. It had been a while since Sapphire last had to deal with this much traffic. She wasn't a silvered Huntress and Tom's celebrate champion for nothing though. Balathon, on the other hand, earned some rather rude remarks from passer-by when he nearly hit a family with children. Not that Dakota was much easier on him after that. Seriously, which way you were going? You make people think we don't teach the kids properly. Jeez, I said I was sorry, okay? Down here, try not to hit anything, Junior went in a sarcastic tone as he descended. Sapphire had been expecting to land on the street, but apparently Junior thought they deserved special treatment as he sat down on the roof. Going down the stairs, they found a very much so sleeping Tink and a workbench. Wake up, Dad, I told you to go to bed, Junior went, kicking the chair. Tink woke with a start, looking around at her confused. Oh, I see, it's morning. Right, I have things to show you, come now, he went, leaving the room and dragging Dakota by the arm into the drawing room. Look, it can draw just like he said it could. Just some clay powder and that ghastly grey dye. He sounded very excited as he presented a small grey stick to Dakota. It wasn't even the length of her thumb, and it was rather fat. Not at all like the ones Tom had brought. Try it out, he continued, gesturing to a piece of paper on the table. Dakota did as instructed, drawing a line on the parchment. It did leave a nice trail on the page, even if it was more of a fat smudge than the elegant lines Tom's pencils could draw. Not bad for a day's work, eh? Definitely not. Very impressive, Dakota had to admit, putting the thing down again. She gasped when she saw what it had done to her hand. What in the... I need to wash my hands. Do you have any water? Oh, sure, follow me, Junior went, as the two left to solve the problem. Right, whoops. I can see why you would want to put some wood around it. Still haven't worked out how to do that, though. You also need to sharpen it, Sapphire interjected. She had tried Tom's pencils before, which was clearly important for good results. Oh, of course, I'll get the grindstones. Just use a knife, it's easier. Oh, well, okay then. What about making it go away again? The rudder? Oh, I'll just use some strips of membrane leather glued together into a little block. Nice and cheap. Here. He tossed Sapphire the little thing. It looked a lot more like what she had been expecting. Is that the lighter? Balathon asked, looking at what Sapphire would best describe as a nice lantern that had been ripped apart poorly. Oh yes, I didn't have time to make that tiny thing, so I just made the little spark thing and put it on the lantern. Look. True to his word, he flicked the wheel on the side, and the thing lit up with a burst of sparks, burning with a nice clean flame. Alternatively, we could just sell these as self-lighting lanterns. Dakota is going to like this, Sapphire concluded. You did all this since yesterday? Sure, the denser was the most difficult. I need to make a proper mold for that. It didn't get hot enough either. It likes to crumble, so I made a few to show off. Okay then, what was it you wanted us for then? Oh, I need some help with this thing, he went, this time grabbing Sapphire by the arm to drag her along. She entertained him for the time being. He had done one hell of a job for one night, after all. He went to the big room where they found him sleeping. I just needed to know about those Nagnet things, so I started putting this together. Not happening, Sapphire protested, as she looked at his very rushed-looking sketches, which to her dismay had a jar of blitz gel on them, with what she assumed were wires sticking out of it. Why not? I mean, I still haven't figured out how to make the thin copper strands it talked about in the instructions, but it was very clear that you needed lightning. What better way to get it than blitz gel? That stuff explodes regularly, Sapphire tried in a voice usually reserved for when Jackalope had a bad idea. It was as effective as always. I ain't gonna hit it with a hammer or anything, Tink protested, much to Sapphire's dismay. Have you ever worked with electricity? She asked very pointedly. No. Then let me teach you a few lessons I have learned. 1, that stuff can and will blow up even when you think you know what you are doing. 2, it's fucking loud when it does so and it breaks things. 3, the man who designed this stuff originally also had this stuff blow up on him. Regularly. So you stand no chance. Tink looked somewhere between offended and a kid who had his toy taken away. Well, then what? He replied with an exasperated shrug. We do as the instructions say, of course. But this is what the instructions said. Fuck. Sapphire really should have read those before betting Tom hadn't been this reckless. Tom and Jackalope had sat down next to each other with their backs to the other kids, so they didn't have to look at their 2 dead sisters. Lothal was doing his best along with Zarko and Unkai to keep them distracted, but it was clear they still wanted to know what was going on. How many do you think they killed? None. They're recruiting. Jackalope replied darkly, staring back towards the keep as it got smaller in the distance. Tom leaned in to whisper into her ear, not wanting the kids to hear. Where do you think they're going next? Knowing our luck, they made it past us on the way here without us spotting them. You don't think that... I don't know, okay? She replied angrily, hair snapping to look at him. Of course she didn't. How could she? She seemed to regret it though, turning to look down at the girl she was still clutching. I was 5. I guess she wins then. Wins what? Tom tried, as delicately as he could. Most unlucky little girl. Tom just put his head on her shoulder. If she'll be half the badass as you are, it can't be all bad. She will be even more badass. She'll have unicorn's blood. God, I hope so, Tom thought to himself. It was not much of a trip. Jax was trying to go as fast as possible while being restrained by Zarko. They couldn't have anyone falling off, and chances were good Jax's job was far from done today. They had made the clearing in a matter of minutes, circling down to land by the edge of the waterhole. Can you hear me? Tom tried to think as they were descending.
Yes,
came the weary response.
Why have you brought the kids?
Jackalope seemed to react to that as well, so he guessed this was on the broad channel. He'd rather spare the kids for now, though. They didn't need to have their faces rubbed in the fat. They were likely all orphans now. They're all that's left. There was a bit of silence following that, coinciding with Jax touching down and trotting over to the small shelter they had built for Celestine.
I take it you came here for blood, then?
Please, we tried. We can't help them. Tom and Jackie carried down the 2 girls, while the others handled the rest of the kids, trying to keep them away. Lothar was doing a remarkably good job of keeping calm, even if the same could not be said for the rest of them. The shock factor was clearly still in effect for them, though. Tom and Jackalope had sat down with Celestine, placing the 2 dead kids before her. You know the punishment for hurting a unicorn. You'll be barred from heaven for doing that. Jackalope didn't seem to flinch at that, so Tom guessed that was common knowledge. Right away, or at some point? He had to ask. He reasoned that chances were pretty good he was going to hell anyway if he died. He could hardly be more of a heretic anyway around these parts. When you die, I think. Good enough for me, Tom replied, drawing his knife. Jackalope grabbed him by the hand, yanking him into an embrace, nuzzling him closely and even giving him a boop, which he guessed was her way of trying to kiss. He returned the gesture as best he could, then she released him, looking a bit coy. Just in case, she went, looking down. Hey, I don't think this will kill me. Besides, I don't even follow your gods, Tom replied, turning back to Celestine. How much and where from?
I didn't say I would let you,
Celestine responded. Tom's grip on the knife tightened.
I will let you try for a price.
Name it, Tom responded. Bartering the lives of a fucking baby. He tried not to think about how much that made him hate her right now.
Find and kill the one who broke my horn,
Celestine replied, switching to a vicious tone.
And make them suffer for it.
With pleasure, Jackalope responded coldly. Tom had to admit he didn't have a problem with that either. He was guessing they would fall under hunting down child murderers. Deal. Now where and how much?
Do try and put it where it can't be seen. I'm looking like a whipped draft horse already.
Tom had to admit, the glamour of when he had first seen her had sort of vanished. Magic life horse though, so he was sure that would return eventually.
You won't need much. A few drops will do.
That wasn't too hard to manage, as he moved to her side. Thank you, he went, as he nicked her by her cloven hoof. He'd expected a horse's hoof, but what the hell? It was hardly the strangest thing about her. The small nick didn't bleed much, but it did the trick, as he scooped up some of the strange silvery liquid in the fuller of his knife. Jackalope brought the basket over, setting it down next to Tom, and held the little girl's mouth open. When you ran out of science, use magic, I guess, Tom went, tilting the knife to let the blood run into the little girl's mouth. The effect was immediate, as the liquid seemed to burn its way through the tongue and sides of the little girl's mouth, bright white light beaming out from where Tom was expecting a wound to be. There was just a quick flash, then it was gone, with no evidence remaining. He flinched back at the sight. It was a violent reaction. Jackalope was clearly not expecting that either, turning away from the flash of light for a split second. Celestine let out a pained sound as the blood hit. Tom guessed she was paying for this somehow then. In fact, she appeared to be paying quite a lot. Then the little girl convulsed, almost like she had been hit with an electric shock, eyes and mouth shooting open, with the same blinding white light pouring from them. It looked more like something out of a horror film as the scream came, an agonizing, desperate scream of a baby in great pain. She thrashed around, the light beaming from her. Tom felt he needed to do something, but Jackalope hit him in the chest with enough force to drive out his breath when he leaned forward. Don't touch her! The light slowly began to fade from blinding to bright to none, as eventually the clear green of the kid's eyes could be seen. The scream turning to the sweetest sound Tom could hope for. Crying.